It was quite shocking.
Janet Cameron was in disbelief in November when she received a water bill from the city for $2,400.
I just thought it was a mistake. Like, I just assumed it had to be an error, some kind of error.
The bill was for a 4.5-month period. In a letter, the city said the home she's renting may have a leak, possibly in the toilet. Cameron says there was, but claims it was fixed months before the bill was issued. The homeowner visits once a month and doesn't believe a toilet leak racked the bill up that high.
He didn't tell me how long it was leaking or how long it went on, but I know from a flapper leaking, it can only leak so much.
The city says the water meter was working properly, and a toilet leak can flush out hundreds of cubic feet of water, costing as much as $40 a day. Cameron's bill notes water consumption to be about 7,300 cubic feet per month. Now, to put that into perspective, her toilet would have had to leak enough water to fill up about 6 of these 10 by 30-foot swimming pools.
If we only read the meter once every 3 months, that kind of a leak can lead to a large bill over that period of time.
But Cameron's meter went 4.5 months between readings. The city reduced her bill to $1,700, but recommend homeowners or occupants check their meters.
There's a readout or like a dial reading on the water meter, and the homeowner can read that as often as they want.
New smart meters will transmit alerts when water usage spikes. Too late for Cameron in a soggy scenario. Matt Young, CTV News, Saskatoon. CTV conducted a random test of the new parking meters here on First Avenue. At 9:47 a.m., we paid $1 for a half hour of parking, giving us until 10:17. At 10:02, we added another $1. However, instead of extending our time until 10:47, the remainder of our original time was voided. So even though we paid enough for an hour, we only got 45 minutes.
What do you think about that?
It's a ripoff?
I didn't know that.
Right.
No.
Do you think that's fair?
No, I don't.
Want at least $1.
The city says that's the way it's supposed to operate, and drivers must pay for enough minutes up front. If you try to add time in the middle of a current session before it runs out, the leftover time is lost. And so is the money you paid.
They're a difference in the way we pay for parking than the current meters, and it's actually the same way that you'd pay at any of these station-type parking, which is like in-park or our precise link parking that we have over at River Landing.
But at least one city councillor tells CTV that's not how adding parking time should work.
You should be able to do that with it attached to your license plate number and not losing the time that you currently have on the pay station. It should add to that existing time, not replace it.
Hill said he would look into changes. Meanwhile, residents are voicing their opinions.
I think I've used it in other cities where it's less, like it feels less of a money grab.
However, the director of community standards says many other cities have adopted the same practice.
We can understand that bit of a learning curve there, but it is a normal practice with these types of stations in many other cities in Western Canada.
As for actually handing out tickets, the city says they're still doing parking enforcement even in areas with the new parking meters. To make the transition as smooth as possible, commissionaires and parking enforcement staff are using their, quote, professional discretion. Matt Young, CTV News, Saskatoon.
It's becoming more frustrating as we go on.
Mark Lees and others on 11th Street whose homes are being affected by slumping land dispute the city's claim it's a private property problem and don't have to help fix it.
I really can't understand how they can say that in good faith when they have a big piece of city property that is in disrepair, that is impacting the properties of the neighboring homeowners.
That property is a back alley called Cherry Lane, but the city says there's no plan to stabilize it. That option would cost as much as $20 million. A report blames the slope failure on natural causes, and the city says it originated on private land.
This is primarily a private property matter, and the city does not involve itself with private property.
But affected residents say they are willing to fix their own properties entirely at their own expense, but can't get equipment into the area until Cherry Lane is remediated. And they say Cherry Lane is sliding downward into houses below. One has already been evacuated.
Instead of saying, oh, you know, we don't need this lane, so we're just going to walk away. Well, that's very convenient for them, but the homeowners at the bottom of the slope don't need their lane on their property either.
According to the Cities Act, a city has the direction, control, and management of all streets within the city. The chief engineer says the lane is not needed.
The lane as a right-of-way is not needed for any public purpose. Every property has access from the right-of-way that's on the front of streets.
As land continues to shift, the situation gets more serious.
Council and executive is going to have to make a decision very soon on that issue.
Meanwhile, Ward 6 councillor Charlie Clark would not comment today, saying he would save his comments for the discussion at the executive committee next week, which could play a critical part in how things move forward. Matt Young, CTV News, Saskatoon.
It similarly is unacceptable in this situation to abandon its responsibility.
That from resident Kent Rathwell, whose house backs onto the alley known as Cherry Lane, being overrun by the slumping riverbank. He says rainfall could have affected the slope, and the city should have managed stormwater better along the Cherry Lane pathway.
Stormwater from beyond Cherry Lane is actually coming down onto Cherry Lane, off of Cherry Lane, and saturating the slope.
The city points to a geotechnical report saying natural elements of geometry, geology, and groundwater caused the slope to fail. But it also says high water levels in the soil can be expected after heavy rainfall. The city says Cherry Lane is a drainage path for stormwater, but it would only play a small part in slope movement.
Rainwater on the surface will lead to increases. That's noted in the monitoring, and that's just due to simply the weight that's added when it rains, because water weighs a significant amount.
The city says rainwater has little effect on actual groundwater, even considering precipitation was above normal in the spring and summer of 2012 when the first slope failure occurred.
If that's the case, then why is it that within almost immediately after there's a rainfall, the slope starts moving?
The recommended option to fix the slope failure involves stabilizing the slope partly along Cherry Lane for a cost of up to $20 million. The lane is city land, although it's only a small part of the slope failure, the rest on private property. But the city says the lane is not needed and has no plans to fix it.
There's tons of subdivisions in Saskatoon where there are no lanes and the same utilities and stuff are accomplished.
The councillor for the ward hopes an agreement can be made.
My view is that there's complexities to this that make it a challenge. There's no question.
Meanwhile, the city is going to continue looking at various options for help from the province. An application to the Provincial Disaster Assistance Program was already denied, citing the slumping as a pre-existing condition from 1999. Meanwhile, homeowners will be given more time to assess the information before the next executive meeting in March. Matt Young, CTV News, Saskatoon.